I spent a portion of my life, I would say, in my 20s, mainly in my 20s and early 30s, believing that striving to make a living and striving to have enough money to be okay in life, or even to get rich in life, was the goal, and that should be my main kind of focus for where I spend my time and energy. And I've since then gone through a lot of things that have shown me that that's actually not the purpose of life. And, this life is so short, and, you really can't take any of that with you. So if that's not the purpose, what is the purpose? And to me, it really is doing things that essentially, bring us closer to the best version that we can be, or the version of us.
Well, hello and welcome to Push to Be More. I'm your host, Matt Edmundson, and we're about to dive into another deep exploration of what truly fuels the journey of life. Now, joining me today, I have another exciting guest, Johanna Wilson from Moss Crossing, and we are going to be delving into her unique life experience, the hurdles she has had to push through, and the ways she recharges her batteries, and well, what she's doing to be more, really. There's a lot of questions, there's a lot of conversation to get into. So get ready. Now, before we do, don't forget you can find all the detailed show notes and complete transcript of our conversation at pushtobemore.com. That's pushtobemore.com. And hey, whilst you're there, if you haven't done so already, make sure you sign up for our newsletter. And each week we will zip all the show's insights, links, and goodies directly to your inbox, absolutely free, automatically. Very, very cool. So make sure you sign up. Now, this episode is proudly powered by Orion Media, the magic behind the scenes that lets entrepreneurs and business leaders like you and me amplify our voices by hosting our own podcast. Now, why on earth would we want to host a podcast? Are you crazy, Matthew? Well, let me tell you, my podcast journey has been nothing short of transformational. You see, it's not just about marketing, and let me tell you, that is a massive part of it, but it's about community, it's about connection and amplification. It's given me a platform to celebrate my customers, my team, my suppliers, and created a ripple of impact far beyond what I could have imagined. But I get it, the technical stuff can feel daunting. Setting up, distribution, getting the tech right, understanding the strategy. Seems like there's a lot going on, doesn't it? And honestly, who wants to get tangled up in production? Definitely not me. And this is where Orion Media steps in. They're in effect your backstage crew that makes sure your show goes on flawlessly. You get to do what you do, which is talk to people, engaging with incredible people, and Orion Media takes care of all the nitty gritty. So if you're wondering whether podcasting is the missing piece in your growth strategy and in your marketing, and if I'm honest with you, I think it probably is, it's time to have a chat with Orion Media. Check them out at orionmedia.com. That's AURION media.com. Have a look, see what you think. Now, that's the show sponsor. Let's talk about our guest, Johanna Wilson, a seasoned business powerhouse from the Pacific Northwest with a 15-year trajectory of navigating through the thrills and challenges of emerging markets. Known for her ability to effortlessly pivot between executive roles, business development, and directorships, she balances her intense professional life with a deep commitment to volunteering and outsmarting her dog, Kingsley, in the game of You Can't Catch Me. Oh, yes. Well, that sounds fascinating. Johanna, welcome to the show. Great to have you. Tell me about this game with your dog. What's that all about?
Well, thank you so much. It's great to chat with you. Yes, my dog's favorite game is to run away. He doesn't really want to chase his ball. He wants you to chase him. So needless to say, I get my aerobic exercise out when I take my dog out into the yard. So it's very fun because we stopped playing tag, in elementary school. So I get to play a little tag.
Yeah, no, it's fair play. I used to have a dog years ago when I was growing up as a kid and as soon as you open the door, if you weren't on it, I mean, as soon as you open that front door, that dog was out, bam, and he'd be straight in the farmer's fields and you wouldn't see him for about 8 hours. And eventually the farmer would bring him back. So,
oh, well, glad you got him back.
yeah, every day. And the farmer was never happy bringing the dog back either. And I'm very sorry. He's like an escape artist, that dog. So it sounds like your dog's the same though.
Yeah, I mean, he loves to run. He's pretty good about staying within the boundaries of our property, but my husband has trained him very well, so I don't have to worry too much about that. But he loves to play, and dogs are great de-stressors, so I'm happy he's here. So.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Johanna, listen, great to meet you. Let's jump straight in with the podcast powerhouse question that I do like to ask, which is simply this. We are pushing the boundaries here at Orion Media, who are paving the way, I love this, for passionate leaders to amplify their reach through podcasting. Now, let's imagine you're about to hit record on your very own podcast show. If you could pull up a chair for anyone, past or present, who's left an indelible mark on your journey, who would you want on the other side of the mic and why?
All right. So the first person that I would have on, this is a past figure, although some would say the present figure as well, would be the infamous Jesus Christ.
Okay.
And, and that may be a controversial answer to some, but I think that he made such a mark on humanity, even outside of the religious following that came in things that he said and the messages that he conveyed to the world, and the things that have happened in modern times. I mean, in my own lifetime, they can be pretty troublesome. And I would just love to sit down with him and ask him how he would advise people today in this modern environment to be able to carry out his message and to people all the way back then, because it was in a different time historically, obviously, and we have different issues today. So for sure, that person. And then living, there's a couple of presidents and CEOs that I would love to interview. The first one would be Lindsay Snyder, who's the president of In-N-Out Burger in the United States. And I don't know if you're familiar with In-N-Out Burger, but
I am. Yes.
Okay. For anyone who may not be familiar, it's just a popular burger chain up and down the West Coast, and they've spread a little bit eastward, not too far though. And Lindsay Snyder is a third generation. She inherited the business from her grandparents, and she went through a lot of personal tragedies and hardships, things like addiction and just all kinds of turmoil in her life. Came out on the other side a lot stronger and a little bit more spiritual. And what she did was connect the business of In-N-Out to a foundation called Slave to Nothing. And Slave to Nothing is a nonprofit that essentially funds other nonprofits that help to combat human trafficking and help to combat addiction. And so I'd love to talk to her about how she does that, how to connect your empire, your business empire, with a cause, to help people in that. So that would be one. And then another one is for similar reasons, and that would be the CEO of Newman's Own. And they make natural and organic food products here in the United States. Paul Newman was the founder, and that business gives 100% of its profits to charities that help children in poverty and animals and things like that. So they're kind of infamous for having the 100% of our profits are donated on all their labels. And they're pretty big corporations. So I would love to chat with them as well for the same reasons, to just get a better understanding from someone who's been doing it for many years. How do you run a large business empire, especially in the food industry, because, those margins are tiny and difficult, to maintain in order to give back. And it's almost like that's the reason behind why they're doing what they do. It's not just to make
Mm.
money.
So, I mean, well, there's three fascinating answers to the question, Johanna, and I would love a conversation with all three myself. I'm not going to lie. If I look down the list, so we've got Christ, we've got Lindsay, and we've got the board at Newman's. The thread that came across to me in all that you said was that they are all very generous people, it seems, and the thing that you sort of connected with was their ability to do charity, to serve communities, to think beyond themselves. Is that an important thing for you? Is that am I getting the right sort of golden thread there amongst those?
Yes, it definitely is. I spent a portion of my life, I would say, in my 20s, mainly in my 20s and early 30s, believing that striving to make a living and striving to have enough money to be okay in life, or even to get rich in life, was the goal, and that should be my main kind of focus for where I spend my time and energy. And I've since then gone through a lot of things that have shown me that that's actually not the purpose of life. And, this life is so short, and, you really can't take any of that with you. So if that's not the purpose, what is the purpose? And to me, it really is doing things that essentially, bring us closer to the best version that we can be, or the version of us that's the closest to God as possible. Whether you want to say God, or you want to say the universe, or the divine source of all creation. People have a lot of different names for this. I call it God. If that's really the purpose, is to become closer to that, what are the things that we should be doing in order to achieve that? And yes, money is a part of our reality. It's something that, we're not really going to get rid of, but how can we use it to achieve this other purpose, so.
Well, two fascinating statements, if you don't mind, I would love to get into. The first one is what happened in your, I think you said 30s, to cause this sort of course direction in your, course direction change in your thinking. What sort of happened there? And then the second part of the conversation for me is if your purpose has changed, how has that impacted your business and what you do? I'm kind of curious what the outworking of that is for you personally. But let's start with what happened in your maybe it wasn't in your 30s, I don't know, but what happened to sort of change your trajectory in your thinking?
Yeah. So I would say my 20s were a time of, trying to find my place in the world. Where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing? And I found myself essentially just working really hard to make money. I left college early in order to go to work, and just very quickly became sort of enveloped with this idea that I needed to be making money and be focusing on work and all of that. But during that time, I had a little bit of a strange spiritual experience that kind of led me to question everything that I had ever known. And that period basically prompted me to go out and explore different parts of the world away from the sort of traditional way of living life. So I moved to Hawaii, and I volunteered on a biodynamic farm out there. And I thought, like, hey, maybe I should start looking into this yoga stuff, and maybe I should start exploring, like, more of these esoteric realms of thinking and spirituality. And so I went on a very long journey, and essentially fell into a group of people who were hard workers, but were also very much practicers of the occult, so to speak. And so I became kind of very deeply wrapped up in certain parts of the occult in terms of moral philosophies about how to live my life and my existence and all of those things. And that also impacted my work because, nothing in that world was telling me, hey, maybe you shouldn't be so focused on yourself. It was actually encouraging me to focus on myself more.
Right.
Sort of like the idea of self-empowerment, self-reliance, self-love, self this, self that, self-help, all those self things. And what ended up happening was I became very arrogant and I became very self-obsessed. I was obsessed with sort of, I don't know, I was obsessed with improving myself, but not focusing on self-improvement in the sense of helping other people. It was more like, what do I need to do to myself in order to get better?
Yeah.
And it led to a type of narcissism, I think. And I really wasn't happy at all. The things I was doing were not fulfilling. I wasn't seeing any self-improvement through my spiritual practices. Things were becoming more and more complex in my life. And eventually something happened that caused me to need to move completely out of the environment that I was living in. So I moved away from the city I was in. I left the relationship that I was in. I kind of left behind a lot of that more Wiccan, esoteric, occult type practices there with the people that lived there, and moved to Oregon where my family is, and ended up staying with my mother for a period because my whole life I had to leave my whole life behind, essentially. And I don't want to get into the details of why, but let's just say some big things happened that made it so that I really didn't have a choice. I had to go. So, so entering this sort of new state, being around new people, I almost feel like I hit a little bit of a rock bottom. It was like my world was so shaken. And again, what I thought was true previously, I was starting to question again and started thinking, I really don't know anything. What I've done so far, I've spent so much time and energy trying to build something with my own philosophies and my own, what I think is right, from within myself. And that's really the message that's pushed a lot today is, what's right for you. You should do whatever you want to do, but that sort of taught me that for me, that's not really true. I really don't always know what's best for me. I might think I know, but that thinking can also get you in some really sticky situations. And so I ended up getting a great job, thankfully. I decided to sort of drop all of my own direction and just kind of give it up to God, basically, because I felt so helpless. I was just okay, I don't know where I'm going next. I'm starting all over again. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to take the things that I learned and incorporate them into a new career or not, or a new life or not. So God, I'm going to sit back and I'm just going to work a regular little job for a year. And I'm going to wait for you to tell me what you want me to do. And I waited and I just decided I'm not going to look, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to try to figure it out. And about 9 months later, I received a job offer through a friend of a friend that paid very well. It was going to allow me to use some of my past experience in sort of a new venue, a new type of position, and in a new industry. And I was also going to be able to use my business skills to help a startup company push forward. So that was very exciting to me. And I thought, thanks, God. Awesome. So I went ahead and took the job, and that position and that company was a startup company in an emerging industry that was highly regulated and just, very disorganized, starting from the ground up. The government agencies didn't know what they were doing. the startups didn't know what they were doing. You had a lot of people coming from a world where normal business practices were not the norm. They were running business kind of under the table. And now they're coming up into a world where their business is regulated and they have to do everything by the book. And then you've got, business tycoons swooping in from New York and from Florida and all these places to also capitalize on the industry. So it's kind of a clash of all kinds of different personalities. And it was very exciting, crazy, fun to help build this company. And the whole time, I didn't really forget what had happened previously. And, just started realizing that, hey, we need to be incorporating philanthropy into our businesses somehow. We have this opportunity to kind of start this new industry. How can we help people? And I've had several experiences with people that have been victimized via human trafficking in my life. And so that's kind of an area that I'm passionate about personally. And so I started trying to talk some of these businesses into donating like a portion of their profits to small nonprofits that helped to prevent human trafficking. We started our own women's networking group that was its own nonprofit, and we would have fundraisers to raise money for one organization up in Washington called Rock, Paper, Scissors. And what the founder of that organization does is she goes into schools and talks to young people about grooming and what that looks like so that they're able to recognize it if it ever happens to them in school or out of school. And yeah, so just trying to incorporate more of that into things. But as time passed, it's been about, I would say 8 years since that all started, eight or 9 years since that all started. And a lot has happened since then. And I've become a lot more involved in just studying kind of like ways of thinking that have a lot more to do with, I guess, humbling ourselves and using life as a way to essentially, like an example would be to act like Christ. It doesn't necessarily have to be Christ, but in my opinion, he's the best figure at the top of the line. So, what can we be doing to act like him? And in business, that can be difficult because, there's just a lot of stuff that goes on that's very much the opposite of that, But yeah, so I've done a lot of studying now of, people who have suffered a lot, people who have been martyred, people who, they live very simple lives. And I like to ask those people, why, and kind of study like what's behind that.
Yeah.
Why would you choose a simple life where all you do all day is, either help orphans or pray for people or whatever it is over, being the top salesperson at Oracle? Like, what causes us to make those choices? And so those are just things that I think about a lot more now. And I definitely, I try to, as much as I can, whenever I get into conversations with people at work or at networking events, just to kind of bring up that there has to be a bigger purpose behind what you're doing, even in your work, in business, than a position you want to achieve or an amount of money that you want to make. So. Yeah.
Wow. That's a fascinating story, or fascinating journey, Johanna. And I'm curious, you obviously faith is playing a big part in your life, right? It's interesting today. I've done 2 podcast recordings, one with you, one with a guy called Todd Saylor. And again, faith was a big part of his journey, actually. And can I ask, did you grow up with faith, or was it discovered sort of after this time in Hawaii? Because the reason I ask is, getting involved with the occult seems to be, at the opposite sort of end of the spectrum to what I know about, say, the Christian faith, for example. And I'm kind of curious how you kind of weaved in and out of that.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in the same exact type of faith that I'm sort of more ascribed to today, but I did grow up. Both of my parents were Protestant ministers in the Assemblies of God churches,
Mm-hmm.
mainly on the west coast of the United States. So they'd be considered to be more, I guess you could say, fundamentalist, very very much focused on scripture and things like that. And a lot of things happened in my family. So needless to say, I was raised, believing in God. I saw angels when I was little. Like I always had weird kind of psychic experiences with heavenly things as a child. And I never forgot that. But for me, I was also a big questioner and researcher. And my dad and my parents ended up leaving the church. Not completely, but they had to leave the church we were at. They got a divorce when I was probably about 10. And from there, that really rocked me. And that caused me to start questioning my religion and my faith and what I was taught. And so I started doing a lot of research on, well, where did the books of the Bible come from? And who wrote them and why? And who put the Bible together originally and why? And what happened to all the books that didn't get put into the Bible? Where are they now? And, how are these decisions made in a historical context? And, thinking more philosophically about the concepts that I was taught about God and about Christianity as a child. And I found that the people around me couldn't answer my questions. There were a lot of people in my particular denomination that really didn't understand the history of Christianity, and they really didn't have answers to my questions. And so my conclusion was that it was all a farce and that I had been lied to and all these things. So I went on my own research escapade and reading about, the Council of Nicaea and Constantine and the lost books of the Bible and all of that. But sort of like, I was 14 years old. So intermingled, I didn't have anyone directing me. So of course, intermingled with that, I also came across, people like Sylvia Browne, who was a famous psychic on television on the Montel Williams show. And so she would sit up there and talk about reincarnation, and she would talk about past lives and all these things. And Edgar Cayce comes into the picture. And so I started to research some more of these people who had more of an esoteric mindset, sort of offering that mindset and those philosophies as an alternative to people questioning what they had originally believed, in my opinion. Like I always see it as like a trapdoor now. It's like there's all these little trapdoors that are out there that you can fall into as a sort of replacement to questions you have. And so I sort of fell down that rabbit hole of, looking into all of these like esoteric things and, mystery schools and occult societies and, ancient native traditions in different parts of the world. And that was kind of what led me into the actual realm of the occult.
Right.
In that process, you kind of have to start brainwashing yourself a little bit to stop believing in God, in the sense that you can even call God God. You have to start calling God the universe or source or the goddess, which is what I replaced it with for a long time. The problem, in my opinion, happens when you start to continue down that rabbit hole. Some of that stuff, when you first encounter it, it's very appealing and it seems very correct. It seems like a much more historically correct explanation of the nature of reality than, like I said, the denomination that I came from that couldn't give me any answers. And so I think that's partly why it appeals to people, is because it appears to have more answers. But all of that stuff is really just surface level of that world. And once you start getting into deeper and deeper into that stuff, you start running across some really, really disturbing things. And it happens very slowly. It's almost like a cult, I would say. And for me, thankfully, I was able to see those things for what they were, and get out before, I became further traumatized or victimized by those things. But a lot of people don't, and they get really stuck kind of in the middle, and that's where they stay their whole lives. So anyway, I was able to kind of come out of that because I really needed something to turn to when I sort of came out of this rock bottom situation that I was in before I moved to Oregon. And I started seeing that, like, in my personal opinion, I felt like I was kind of being spiritually attacked. Like, I felt like a lot of really, like, bad feeling things were, like, coming at me, and, like, just this dark cloud was hovering over me. And I didn't really know what it was. But I talked to someone in my family who was a Greek Orthodox Christian. And the Greek Orthodox are, pretty different from, the Protestant, in that it's sort of like the original church that was founded by the apostles that kind of stayed the same all the way up to today. And it's just been preserved ever since. And so I was basically just told, just essentially use the phrase Jesus Christ and say, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, when you're feeling those things, or cross yourself. And because I had come from the occult, I knew or believed that things like that did have power, because symbols and rituals and things like that are all about what creates power in the occult.
Yeah.
But they like to steal things, from other faiths. So I did that, and I started going to church again at a Greek Orthodox church, and just to kind of like get a little bit of peace once a week. I just needed some peace. So I started going once a week, and I kind of felt like Harry Potter. Every time I would go to church, I would like walk in the doors, and I felt like I was like putting on this cloak of invisibility, and then I could walk out and keep that protective cloak on the rest of the week. And it could have been in my head, but I actually don't think it was in my head. I think it was actually a phenomenon that was occurring. And so that's what got me started on getting back into researching the history of Christianity. Like, what caused me to break away in the first place, and what's going on over here. And I found some really amazing philosophies within that branch of Christianity where the history was all there. It was like every question I asked about, the books of the Bible, and what about this supposed contradiction, and what about that thing, and what about this thing that happened in history, and when they put the books together, and the councils of Nicaea that happened to kind of like build the original philosophy of Christianity, or preserve it rather. All of the information was there. It was like the guardians of the history I was with the guardians of that history, and they were able to explain to me, both in a spiritual context, but also in a historical context, what had happened and why. And it gave me a completely different mindset of Christianity than I had ever had before.
Yeah.
And one that was a bit more effective, I guess I would say, than what I had encountered previously. It's just less. When I was growing up, my faith was more, it was just like missing something, it was like, there wasn't the depth there that I really needed to like sink my teeth into. And I don't really know how to explain it, but now I feel like I have that. And if I hadn't been involved in the occult, and if I hadn't actually subscribed to that for so long and gotten so deep into it, I don't know if I would have made it back to Christianity, which is really interesting. And now I encounter people that I can have conversations with who are in that world, because there's a lot of misconceptions and almost hatred towards Christianity, mainly because so many Christians are doing Christianity wrong. So like the general public sees that hypocrisy and they just get all riled up about it. And, they're like, yeah, we hate Christians and we can't have religion involved in anything, like separation of church and state and all of that, which I totally understand. But I think that when you can speak the language of people who are in different mindsets, maybe because you've been in that mindset yourself in the past, it's easier to sort of relate to where you're at now to them. You can have those conversations in a different way than someone, who doesn't really speak their language. So I think that that's been a benefit of the whole thing. So
wow. So here you are then, going through quite the phrase that I don't know if it's the right phrase, Johanna, but it sounds like you are having quite a significant identity crisis. Well, having two of them really. One when your parents got divorced, and the other one when you were in the occult. You had this major identity crisis. Everything sort of stripped away from you. And the thing that I heard you talk about was you're like, right, I'm gonna go get a job, and God, you're gonna have to open some doors, and I'm just gonna go sit here for a little while and just pause my life and not make any rash decisions. Which I think is, I don't know if you think the same. In hindsight, seems incredibly wise. So often I think when life is crazy and because life is very much seasons, isn't it? You go through seasons, and you're in one of those seasons where it's just all not right and things are going wrong, and you feel like you're putting out fires. The temptation is just to go at 1,000 miles an hour, isn't it? And just keep going and try and solve problems and try and make life better. But actually, it sounds like what you did was just pause and just wait and find peace during that time. Once a week, feeling like Harry Potter going to putting on the invisible cloak. It sounds like that was quite a restorative 9 months after some quite harsh realities, I suppose, or quite traumatic events, maybe. And I'm curious to hear that, when you're 14, you're reading some quite dense books that most adults still haven't read, and you've got a lot of your questions answered, proving once again that perhaps faith is not actually blind, which I do take exception to when people say, oh, faith is blind. I'm like, no, I think you have to research more than you think you do. And it's quite fascinating listening to your story. I guess, Johanna, before I turn to the question box, because I'm aware of time, but I'm guess if you could go back and have a conversation with your 12-year-old self, your parents are getting divorced. Because it's interesting that the phrase, the comment that I found really fascinating here is that if you didn't go through the occult, you maybe wouldn't have found your way back to your childhood faith, for want of a better expression. That actually you've got to choose to grow through what you're going through sometimes, right? And we all look back at events and go, I kind of wish that didn't happen. But if that didn't happen, I don't know if I'd be where I am today. It's quite an interesting thought process, isn't it? A thought exercise. But if you could go back to your sort of 12-year-old self and give yourself some advice, what would you say?
I would definitely say to keep praying through everything. And, I think prayer as a concept can cross, many different genres of thinking. It doesn't just have to be specifically a Christian prayer. So for me, praying to God, I would have said, keep doing that through the whole process. I think that would have been probably the most powerful thing I could have done for myself in terms of, staying connected and just protection going through all the trials.
Keep praying. It's an interesting one. And so you're getting involved in charities, and you're supporting charities that are involved in stopping trafficking and grooming, which is just a very sad world which we live, that you have to have those kind of conversations in the first place. But is there a reason why that charity sector specifically, as opposed to, say, I don't know, third world development? Or we've had various people on the podcast. I'm thinking like Ram Gidimore, who was very active in the fair trade movement. He was on early in the podcast. He's also very involved in anti-trafficking. We had various people on, all, were sort of philanthropic kind of. Vaishali, she was on recently. She's very philanthropic. Yeah, you probably should connect with her. She's lovely. But it's one of those where you kind of go, I'm curious to know what the driver was behind that charity sector specifically, or was it just that was there in front of you at the right time?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've just had experiences. I was friends with someone who used to do rescue work with the police force for abducted children. So I witnessed and heard about some pretty gruesome rescues that happened through my friend. I mean, this is close to 20 years ago. But then I also had a very young friend who was the daughter of a friend of mine. The friend of mine died, and her daughter was groomed into prostitution at the age of 13 through her middle school by a young boy who was being taught how to be a pimp. And so these things happen.
Wow.
Yeah, and she has a whole story. And I had to like rescue her when she got kidnapped at gunpoint at a certain point. It was very crazy. So like God has just put me in some really interesting situations with that issue. And like to me, the child trafficking aspect of what happens, in my opinion, is the worst thing that's happening on this planet right now as a result of evil. It's like evil impacts so many different areas of life, but that particular thing, child sex trafficking, in my opinion, is the worst. And so in my, like logically in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to try to contribute to the worst issue. And I do have these experiences that kind of drive me to, like, I've seen it firsthand. Like, I know it's not a joke. I know it's not a conspiracy theory. And like, if people don't do something, it's just going to keep happening. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, my wife works with a charity here in Liverpool. Again, certain ladies from certain cultures are more prone to this. And I mean, it does happen in the West, it totally does, but it is happening all over the world, and it's horrific and it's heartbreaking. And I get to hear some of their stories, and I'm just like, your heart just breaks for them, because you're like, why is this not on the news? Why am I hearing about another stupid politician making another stupid statement? Because it's inconsequential in reality. And I don't know. It's one of those, I suppose. We don't like to hear about it all the time, do we? But like you say, it happens and it's real, and it's definitely something to get connected to and get involved with, I think. Especially, if you have the means and wherewithal to do so. I think it's incumbent in a lot of ways to get involved with that. And especially because I think it became more real to me when I had a daughter, probably more so than when I had my sons. But when having a daughter, it just made me think about a lot of things that I'd never actually thought about before. It was quite sobering, I suppose, in a lot of ways, So good on you for doing that. But yeah, lots more to be done. Lots more to be done. What does growth look like for you, Johanna? What's the next 5 or 10 years got in store?
Well, those are questions I am again asking God at the moment. Where am I going?
Has he answered yet? Has he given you the answer yet?
I haven't seen a super clear answer, but I feel like I hear the voice again kind of saying, like, do another pause and let me show you. So I think I may end up doing that. But, I love the business world, and I do plan to, stay in it to some degree. So we'll have to see where that takes me. But, I would say like the growth that I'm actually focused more on these days is, just kind of like overcoming my own flaws and really trying to like get that I don't know everything, and that the messaging that has been drilled into my brain for years, which is like, where you're going, what you should do. Like, no. Like I need to tamper that down and really just try to like hear, from someone who has something that has an aerial view of reality of like what I should be doing, where I should be going. And really just like trying to take criticism better from others, and really look at myself. Like, am I doing these things that people are telling me I'm doing? And how can I get better at that? What are practices that keep me focused on what's right rather than, the sort of the scramble to like have what I need, to have all the money I need. Do I have enough in my retirement account? Like, do I have enough for home repairs? And am I hanging out with all the family members enough? It's like, those all matter, but more importantly, like, how am I acting towards other people? Like, am I doing the things that are cultivating good qualities inside of myself? So, yeah. So just really just trying to be able to let things go and trust more, realizing that I'm not in control. That's a really hard one for me. I think for a lot of people, it's hard. Those are all things that I'm really like practicing at every day to get better at. And I think that's like where the real growth comes in, is when you have like a family member say, you're a lot nicer than you used to be.
Well, at least you're moving forwards, right? Exactly. It's better that way around than, oh, you're not as nice as you used to be. I don't know. Definitely better that way around. That's really interesting, because actually when I asked you the question, what does the future look like? The response really was character. I want to develop my character. And I need my character to develop, which is not a typical answer. We're, as entrepreneurs, we're very good at saying, "Wow, in the next 5 years, the turnover will grow by 25% per year." But actually, developing character, I think, is probably the foundation to. Well, for me, character is the foundation to a successful business life, because you've got to have the character.
Your character dictates where your needle is pointed,
and
so you know what I mean. It's like your needle can be pointed in whatever. You can have whatever goals you want in the direction your needle is pointed. But the real question is, like, is your character pointing the needle in the right direction? Because it's really easy to go on a crazy train for life in the wrong direction. If your mindset isn't right. So.
No, totally. I remember that Stephen Covey book, The 7 Habits, and he talked about the difference between leadership and management. And I've kind of adapted it over the years. In the sense that, success is about climbing the ladder, and purpose and character is making sure the ladder is against the right wall. And it's the same sort of thing, making sure the needle's pointing in the right direction. Loving this conversation, Johanna. It's great to hear your story. But for now, we are going to turn to the question box, state-of-the-art graphics on the screen if you're watching the video. This is where I'm going to flip through the cards. You're going to tell me when to stop, where we stop. That's the question we ask. So, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay, tell me when to stop.
Okay, stop.
Okay. Well, given the conversation that we've just been going through, the question is, are you ready? And I want you to know you chose this question, right? You told me to stop, and we've got it on video. Is it better to give money to the government or to charity?
Oh, that is such a good question. I would definitely say, as a person who works regularly with government agencies as a part of my job, and I love them. However, I would say it's probably more likely to be used. It'll go a bit further giving it to charity. So as soon as it enters the wheels of bureaucracy, it's like, it kind of loses its power a little bit.
It does, and I understand what you're saying. I think for me, it's an interesting question, because when I think about it, your default answer is to go, well, I'd much better give the money to charity. But only because I'm in control of where that goes to. And I feel like with taxes and the money that I pay to government, I have no option. I either pay it or I go to jail, right? Whereas with charity, it's within my discretion. Does my business give money to charity? Do I give money to charity? Do we do the fundraising, like you've been doing for the trafficking charities and stuff like that? That's a choice. That's a decision. Whereas I feel like taxes, they're a decision to some degree, But man, if you get caught out, you're going to jail, right? So it's an interesting one, isn't it? And I wonder if that's part of the reason why we feel maybe the way we do, because you pay your taxes because you have to, but rarely do you feel your tax money is being spent well. And we always can complain about that. Whereas with charities, we can give money to charities, we can feel good about that. I suppose you could argue that charities don't always spend the money well. But it's a distinct choice, isn't it? And I can feel good about that. I never feel good paying my tax. I'm like, it's all that money gone to the government, and they're just going to spend it on a hammer.
There's a philosophy in my faith, which is there's a big difference between giving happily, voluntarily with love, and giving with a bad attitude. And it's like the thought is, the church says, like, if you're going to give us money with a bad attitude and you don't want to give us that money, then you keep that money, because we don't want you giving it to us with, a bad taste in your mouth. If you can give happily and freely as an act of charity, as an act of, giving to the poor, essentially, it's a different act than giving by force. So it's almost like two different acts in a way.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I suppose that's what makes it quite interesting, isn't it? But that's not to say, obviously, the politicians waste all our money, and I'm sure they work very hard, and there's a lot of public servants that do a good job. But I'm with you. They do. I guess if we didn't pay our taxes, there would be social collapse. So I get the need to pay them. But I think if it was a personal choice. Well, that's the beautiful thing, I suppose. We can do both. And we can use that. The good thing, I suppose, in England is if you give money to charity, I don't know if it's the same in the States, if you give money to charity, you don't have to pay tax on that money that you give.
Okay.
So that always feels good to fill that little form in at the end of the year, which says I've given this much money, and the government gives them all that money that I've paid in tax for that back, and it's lovely.
Right. And then you can keep that and give more to charity. So
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Johanna, it's been great talking to you. If people want to reach out, if they want to connect with you, find out more about what you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
They can find me on LinkedIn and send me a message directly on LinkedIn, or they can email me to my personal email address, which is my first name, Johanna, Johanna, Lee, Lee, Wilson, Wilson @gmail.com.
Fantastic. Well, we'll of course put all those links in the show notes as well, which you can get along for free with the transcript. If you've signed up to the newsletter, it'll be coming to your inbox as well. But that'll all be on the website, pushtobemore.com. Johanna, listen, it's a fascinating day today because we spoke to two people and faith has played a big part in that. And it was just really interesting listening to your journey and how this is all sort of connected and worked out for you. And, I appreciate your openness. I appreciate your willingness to talk about it. I was always brought up, it's funny, the question at the end, I suppose, I was always brought up, you never talk about religion and tax, or religion and politics, the two things you don't talk about, and the two things that we've talked about today. It's been quite refreshing, actually, it's quite lovely. Thoroughly enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. And super thank you for coming onto the show.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Wow, that's a wrap on another fantastic conversation. A massive, huge round of applause, of course, to Johanna for joining us today and shedding light on her very inspiring journey. A huge thanks again to today's show sponsor, Orient Media. For all you change makers out there contemplating podcasting as your new vehicle of expression and connection and marketing, do connect with them at orientmedia.com. And of course, they'll also be linked on the website as well, pushtobemore.com. Now remember, keep pushing to be more. Don't forget to follow the show wherever you get your podcasts from, because we've got some seriously compelling conversations lined up, and I don't want you to miss any of them. And in case no one has told you yet today, dear listener, let me be the first to tell you, you are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you have to bear. Johanna has to bear it. I have to bear it. You got to bear it as well. Now, Push to Be More is brought to you by Aurea Media. For transcripts or show notes, swing on by the website pushtobemore.com. And a big kudos to the team that makes this show possible, which includes the wonderful Sadaf Bainon and Tanya Hutzalek. And a shout out, of course, to Josh Edmundson for our incredible theme music. So from me, from Johanna, thank you for joining us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. I'll catch you on the flip side. Until then, keep pushing. Bye for now.